What's up, everyone? Kilosaurus Rex here, and I hate this figure. Whoops, wrong one. What's up, everyone? Kilosaurus Rex here, and this figure's okay. HIYA Toys Exquisite Basic Translucent Heat Ray Godzilla 2014 action figure. We have a lot to talk about. For starters, this is yet another version of the MonsterVerse Godzilla. My fellow Gojitism patients will recognize this as the Godzilla that appeared in the 2014 film with the same name. For anyone who doesn't have Godzilla-flavored autism, Godzilla 2014 was released 10 years after the film Godzilla Final Wars. It marked the beginning of a new generation of Godzilla that continues to this day. This idea of Godzilla was built from one of two different Godzilla movie styles. The two Godzilla movie styles are as follows. The first style is giant monster representing nuclear destruction and devastation. The second style is big monsters go rawr. Obviously, the latter was the foundation of this particular film. Now, this Godzilla film is one of my top favorites, but there are several reasons why it is not the favorite. Let me explain. Starting with the positives, this Godzilla design is one of the absolute best, second only to the OG Godzilla and Final Wars Godzilla. The CGI in the film is top tier, and the effects, oh my god. I remember watching this in the theaters and feeling the whole oomph of Godzilla as he just stomped his way across the screen. Wait, I actually went outside? What? How? I also love the roar of this Godzilla. I don't care who you are, that's one of the best roars that Godzilla has ever had. This Godzilla's roar actually honors the originals by using man-made instruments and tools, and also modernizing it with sound technology of 12-channel IMAX. Music to my ears. I would use the Godzilla roar as a ringtone for my phone, but it works much better as an alarm clock. Another kaiju positive is the enemies of the film, the Mutos.
Massive unidentified terrestrial organism.
They are amazingly monstrous. The designs are so well done. I love the style and design that they went with while making the Mutos. I don't care if you think it's too Cloverfield or too bug-like. It's just, I love it. I love it a lot. And the fights and destruction scenes with these Mutos are absolutely amazing. I also really like the plot of the movie. I actually believe it's a little underrated in a couple ways. Don't get me wrong, the story is weak and that some of the characters are forgettable. What is this guy's role again? He's like supposed to be the main character, despite the fact that he's kind of just there trying to make his way back to his family. Seriously, who even cared about this guy? The reason I enjoy the plot of this Godzilla movie is because there's a very clever use of irony in the film. Godzilla's first appearance and battle with the male Muto sparks this argument between Monarch and the military.
We rig a nuclear warhead with a shielded timer, put it on a boat and send it 20 miles out. The radiation lures the Mutos, and the Mutos lure Godzilla.
And we detonate.
They feed on radiation.
Correct. That's why we use the bomb as bait.
And kill them with the sheer force of the blast.
Doctor, if you have any other ideas, I am all ears.
Godzilla may be the answer. He's here to restore balance. He can defeat them.
And what? We just stand by and watch? I'm sorry, Doctor. I can't take that risk.
The irony is the military created a weapon that was supposed to destroy all of the Titans by luring them with the bomb's nuclear energy, which actually worked. Just a little too well. As soon as the bomb was armed, the male Muto spawned in and just straight up stole the bomb and brought it to the center of San Francisco, where he and the female Muto used it to create a nest. In doing so, the Mutos basically called in a bomb threat by settling down to raise a family. Now, don't quote me on this, but I'm fairly certain that during an active bomb threat, the military is not allowed to use missiles, explosives, certain electronics, firearms, or in some cases radios within the blast range. Which means that because of the military's attempt to destroy all monsters, they now have no choice but to...
Let them fight.
Now that is a kick-ass plot! While I enjoyed those aspects of the film, it also has some very major negatives. And for the negatives, I'll just say, in regards to the character and story, they killed off the best human character of the whole movie before Godzilla even showed his face. The Monsterverse would be significantly more enjoyable if Bryan Cranston was still a part of it.
You're goddamn right.
My biggest complaint, unfortunately, is in the final battle of the film. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a classic kaiju battle as much as the next guy, and this battle would have 100% been one of my top 5 favorites. If I could fucking see it! I know the Mutos knock out electric devices within a certain range, which caused a blackout in the city of San Francisco, but there are other ways to light your kaiju battle, and the film used none of them. The only way I'm able to enjoy the final act of the movie is in a pitch black room. Not to mention the filmmakers decided to be major dickheads by flashbanging us as soon as the battle was over. I can still see a mushroom cloud in my retinas. Are you happy, filmmakers? Was that funny to you? The only thing that's really beneficial about having a kaiju battle in the abyss is, well, this scene. One of the best atomic breath reveals in Godzilla movie history. Second only to this scene from Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Y'all ready for this?
Now that we've covered the single best part of the entire movie, let's cover the figure that was made to recreate it. This is HIYA Toys' second attempt at creating a Monsterverse 2014 Godzilla figure. The first attempt was fairly popular in promotions, however, in person it was extremely flawed. Thankfully, this figure managed to correct those flaws, but also introduced some individual flaws of its own. Oh, for God's sake, Godzilla's sake. Starting with the paint and detail. I'm upset about it. The paint job itself is amazing, and the attention to detail is beautiful. In fact, it's better than the first figure. Now, this figure does have the added on color of the dorsal plates because of his... you know. Turns out that change, being the most obvious, wasn't actually the only change in paint and detail. The paint of this figure is especially better at the head. The detailing on the head is just beautiful. And those eyes, oh my God, look at those eyes. As opposed to the previous version where I couldn't find his fucking pupils. And the absolute worst part of the previous figure's head was its mouth. Oh, fuck, it's ugly. Are his teeth bleeding or something? Seriously, what the hell? Plus, the box for this figure was completely misleading. Look at the amazing detail on the promotional images, and then look at the final figure in comparison. Sweet zombie Jesus. Thankfully, this version has some much clearer painted teeth and eyes. And if you look inside of his mouth, you'll notice the paint they used for the inside of his mouth is less of a bright red and more slate pink. I love it! This head's paint and detail is superior to the first version. At least the main head looks better. We'll get to it when we get to it. Now, the most obvious difference in paint and detail is the... say the
Fine, Bart!
Dorsal plates. Amazing. Interestingly enough, this is the only film in the MonsterVerse where Godzilla has a singular row of dorsal plates that light up for his atomic breath. Not sure why they changed that detail, but can't say I care, because the more dorsal plates we have lighting up, the better. But we don't need the eyes to glow too, Hollywood! The center row of dorsal plates are painted with a beautiful light blue to show his atomic glow, and the paint is so well done that it looks like a solid glow from the top of his head all the way down to the tip of his tail. And the detail all the way to the tip of his tail is amazing! Despite how incredibly tiny the tip of his tail is, the blue paint actually continues all the way to the end, and it's so precise and well done. No paint smudges or mishaps. It's a beautiful light blue on every dorsal plate that glowed in the movie. And looking more towards the back of Godzilla, his back has also been painted a small amount of light blue near the dorsal plates to emphasize the glow effect. Even without the translucent lighting, this figure looks like it's glowing. Amazing, HIYA Toys. Well done. The HIYA Toys sweatshops have earned another nap break. Although some of the sidewall dorsal plates aren't actually fully painted, they just have a couple little bits of gray on them. I'm guessing that's to make the glow of the translucent dorsal plates a little bit brighter, but without a light to emphasize the whole glowing effect, they just look like unpainted dorsal plates, which isn't bad. You just look at it from a distance and problem solved. While the detailing on the figure is much better than the first one, the color scheme is a little off. Now, I actually love this color. I really do. It looks really nice for this particular Godzilla, and I actually think it's more film accurate. At least in the dark. In daylight, you can tell that Godzilla has a more grayish brown color, much like the color of the first figure. Well, not that much like it. Now, I know the first figure received a lot of complaints about the shit brown color of his underbelly and arms, but I actually kinda liked the color separation. At least the idea of it. It seemed a lot more accurate because of how common it is in nature for reptilian or amphibious creatures to have different colored underbellies. I just wish the color difference was more faded in and less night and day. This figure does actually have that faded in detail from his outer body to his underbelly, but the colors have reverted to slate gray and slightly not slate gray. This is so frustrating. HIYA Toys has these two amazing paint and detail jobs that are just so separate that they almost look like different characters. Why can't they just find a way to mix these two beautiful colors together into one figure? I mean, knowing HIYA Toys, they probably will. They'll probably release a light-up version of this Godzilla form next year and not release the actual figure until the 22nd century. The painting and detail on this figure is excellent. The color is just a bit too plain in my opinion. Now, the sculpt and design are pretty much the same as the first figure, which at first was disappointing, but over time, the sculpt actually managed to grow on me. At first, the sculpt and design seemed very disproportionate. I didn't like how small the dorsal plates were in comparison to the body, and I thought the legs weren't thick enough and the tail seemed unreasonably long, but looking back at the movie design, the dorsal plates are a bit smaller when compared to the actual body, especially around the tail. And that was actually intentionally done for scaling purposes. Let me explain. In this scene where Godzilla arrived at the Golden Gate Bridge, he seemingly surfaced and swam right up to a Navy ship and stopped because it was in his way. However, it is revealed that what we saw wasn't even Godzilla's whole body. It was just his tail. He was actually under the battleships preparing to surface. This Godzilla's design was meant to be misleading so they could show just how big this version of Godzilla is. They did a similar trick moments later when Godzilla stood up next to the bridge and his back was hit with missiles while his dorsal plates were reflected in the window of a school bus. Later, his whole body just completely towered over the Golden Gate Bridge and just walked right through it. As for his legs and tail, yes, they are pretty much accurate to the film. The tail is sharper and the legs compared to the arms and body are noticeably larger.
Damn, boy, he's thick!
So yes, the sculpt and design are actually very film accurate and they are very precise. So It's not that bad. The only reason I'm still not the biggest fan of this HIYA Toys figure is because the overall size of the figure itself. And like I said before, we'll get to it when we get to it. Honestly, the sculpt of this figure is yet another superior aspect to the first version. The scales and dorsal plates look amazing, and the head is much better looking and more accurate. I sure am fixating on this figure's head. It's almost like I want to shove a big fat rod down his throat. But before I can do that, I have to make sure this figure is strong enough to take my rod. So with that, let's talk articulation and engineering. There is no difference between this figure and the first one in terms of engineering. However, this one is actually a bit easier to handle because of the material it's made out of. Now, the difference in material between this figure and the first one is a very important detail that I will not explain because I like teasing you.
Yeah, boy.
JK, I got you. HIYA Toys has a tendency to use different material when engineering an atomic breath Godzilla. More specifically, a translucent atomic breath Godzilla. In order for the translucent material to successfully glow under certain lighting conditions, it has to be lighter in weight, more flexible, and most importantly, have strong, solid, clear parts. Now, don't quote me on this, but the more rubbery plastic material has more solid, translucent parts than the typical hard plastic does. This allows for an equally stable figure structure while also allowing more of a glow for the translucent material. This aspect is present in the GVK translucent atomic breath Godzilla, which I do have, and the limited edition Burning Godzilla battle version, which I also have. Epic flex on yo ass. The GXK Energized Godzilla is also made out of this rubbery plastic material, although it's not translucent. It's supposed to I don't know, glow or look pretty under UV lighting, but I can't figure out how to make that work. Let me know how stupid I am in the comment section. Oh, and speaking of the comment section, if any of you guys out there know the technical term for the material these figures are made out of, please let me know. I am getting really sick and tired of saying solid plastic parts, rubbery plastic parts, flexible plastic material, clear translucent parts, colored translucent rubbery parts. The entire figure is made out of this rubbery plastic material, which actually makes it a bit more flexible than the original version. Despite having the exact same amount of articulation, the more bendy, flexible rubber material is a bit softer and allows for a higher range of posability. However, the material itself is a bit more vulnerable to heat, which is probably why HIYA Toys doesn't use this material for every Godzilla figure. So if you feel the need to loosen the joints with a hair dryer or heat gun or your dragon breath, I advise caution. The material, even when exposed to a little heat, can turn from solid plastic to silly putty in a matter of minutes. The figure's range of articulation is utterly amazing thanks to that. Thanks to the material, the joints are amazingly sturdy. Starting at the head, we have the classic hinge joint at the bottom jaw, as well as the hinge joint for the tongue. The tongue joint on my copy is actually a fair bit harder to move, and not gonna lie, I kinda like it. After all, the stronger the tongue is, the better he can eat that Muto pussy. Dumbbell joint at the head and start of the neck, and thanks to this Godzilla's accessory, you can actually have a look at the improved HIYA Toys neck engineering. The neck is no longer just one long dumbbell joint. It is now a tiny dumbbell joint connected to a double-sided socket at the top of the base and neck. Fucking finally. The arms are attached by ball joints and the elbows are double hinge joints. Ooh, how do I know they're double hinge joints? Simple. I broke the HIYA Toys code. Thanks to the more flexible material, I was able to fully straighten out the arms and take a flashlight to the arm and actually look at the joint inside the bicep and forearm. It is in fact a double ratchet hinge joint. As you can see, there are two discs put together that make up the hinge joint itself. And on those discs, you'll find that there is a little lump on both of them, which is a sign of cancer. It's Godzilla, of course he has multiple different kinds of cancers. The lumps act as a single ratchet when interacting with another lump within the arm sockets, giving us that solid clicking sound that you can hear in all of the hinge joints in this figure. I knew it was ratcheted joints! This proves that I'm not crazy! right? Leave a comment. The knees also have those ratchet joints and are also double bending. The bottom bend is a bit more of a bitch than the top bend. I'm not sure if that's because of the sculpt or the joint, but the issue doesn't really matter because the joint still works. Every other joint on this figure is a ball joint. A decent ball joint in the torso, allowing him to do an ab crunch, and thanks to the material, he's able to do a full 180. But why would you do that?
Oh, shit!
And for the magnificent tail, 10 ball joints. Not the most joints for a HIYA toy's tail, but as I said before, thanks to the material, the quality of the joints is superior to the quantity. There's also a much better ball joint in the ankles, which allows for a much wider variety of posing for his feet. And for the wrists, there is a bit of a longer dumbbell ball joint than on this wrist than the original. In certain poses, the gap between the wrists kind of stands out, but it doesn't really bother me. But the ball joints were intended to be longer, so it could make attaching these included alternate hands a bit easier, which it does. Thankfully, this figure's wrists have a solid connection for all 4 hands. Thank God for that. The alternate hands have a closed fist look, which is well sculpted and with a decent detail, but thanks to the singular gray paint, it's kinda hard to find where his fingers end and the claws begin. But to me, it doesn't really matter since he's making a fist. And since we're on the topic of this figure's accessories, let's talk about the absolute best and worst part of this figure. Oof. The included heat ray, or atomic breath part, as I like to call it since I have the Gojitism. The atomic breath part itself is beautiful. The part is made out of a solid light blue plastic that is also translucent, and it is an excellent recreation of his atomic breath in the film. The atomic breath part itself also appears to have this, white coloring at the base to replicate the ignition color as it's exiting his mouth. As for the atomic breath part's head... For those of you who saw my last review, you're probably aware of the fact that this figure has been getting some serious backlash ever since the promotional pictures were released. Admittedly, yes, the promotional pictures for this figure made Godzilla look dentally challenged. But I actually have this neat coping mechanism that works really well. For those of you who complained about this figure's promotional pictures, you should really try it. It's called reading the fucking fine print! Quote, prototype shown, comma, final product may be different. End quote. Now, I had high hopes that the final product would actually feature some fixes for this painting and sculpting mishap. No. In fact, somehow it managed to look worse than the prototype. Oh my god. Sadly, the alternative headpiece for the heat ray suffers from a major lack of detail. There are no sculpted in teeth, and there is zero paint to even suggest that he actually has teeth. And the inside of the mouth has little to no pink painting. And this is how it ended up looking worse than the prototype, because even on the prototype's images, you could see that the interior of the mouth had a lighter pink painting. When you zoom into the paint on this figure's head, there's little to no paint whatsoever. In fact, I don't think you can even see the pink paint on camera. Although I have to give this head some credit because the painting and detail on the scales is actually really consistent with the rest of the figure. When the head itself is attached to the rest of the figure, it actually blends with it pretty smoothly. Even the eyes of the alternative head are just as well painted as the primary head. It blends in almost perfectly with the figure, except for the goddamn mouth. It stands out so much that I just can't look at it up close without that atomic breath part. Looks like Grandpa lost his dentures and is pissed about it.
You damn kids, what have you done with my teeth?
From a distance, the head manages to blend in pretty well with the figure, but if you get an up-close shot of the head, it just looks terrible. You would think that a plain head with no teeth and very few gums would be ideal for sucking on a big fat rod! But technically he's not sucking. he's hurling. When you attach the atomic breath part, it undeniably looks amazing. You just have to avoid looking at the head up close. But if you do want to get a close-up atomic breath shot, you could always throw in a figure stand, not included, to hold the atomic breath part in the primary head. Now that looks magnificent. Unlike the previous HIYA Toys Atomic Breath Godzillas, there is no neck sleeve to recreate this one shot that he did in one scene in one movie. Not gonna lie, it still looks pretty cool. But thanks to the improved neck engineering, the figure can look straight up with no problem. What really would have been awesome is an alternative neck piece attached to an alternative head that makes Godzilla look straight down so he can recreate his first ever kiss of death finishing move. That would be cool. But in practice, that part might actually look a little silly. Oh, and speaking of his kiss of death move, this Godzilla figure looks most at home when displayed next to the one and only HIYA Toys Muto. I don't have one. It's probably fine. Since this figure just got released, there's probably a surplus of Muto figures in stock for anyone who wants to put the two of them together. Son of a bitch! Full disclosure, I don't know if it's ever coming back. I am incredibly sorry that I am unable to display this guy next to the HIYA Toys Muto figure, but I have several other figures I can place this guy next to, and hopefully that makes up for my incompetence. Am I even a real Godzilla fan? Here he is next to Dasani Water Bottle, HIYA Toys Godzilla Pre-Evolved, HIYA Toys Godzilla Evolved, HIYA Toys Kong, my previous review, HIYA Toys Godzilla 2000, first review, HIYA Toys Shimo. Wow. It's not a problem if I don't admit it, right? Funko Pop 6-inch Godzilla Evolved, and Lego Avengers. If you're a major completionist, you've probably already got the Muto figure as well as the first 2014 Godzilla figure, in which case I would recommend picking this guy up just to complete your entire setup, but that's only for the completionists in my audience. If you had to choose between this figure and the original 2014 figure, I would go with this one. It's an excellent figure, faithful to the best part of the entire movie, feels better, and despite the flaws of this figure itself, I still think it's the better one of the two. 6 out of 10. I would have given it a 7 if it was a little bit bigger, but there's actually a bit of a conspiracy around this figure's size. If you'd like to hear said theory, feel free to stick around. If you don't want to hear it, then the video's basically over. To start this theory, first I have to place this guy right next to the pre-evolved Godzilla. And by right next to, I mean shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot, equidistant away. Now when I do place them next to each other, you'll notice that this figure is a little less than an inch shorter. Now at this point, I would like to inform you that between the 2014 Godzilla film and the 2019 King of the Monsters film, Godzilla actually did grow and change his form slightly. Most obviously, the dorsal plates are at their peak look and he's bigger in height, while his tail stayed the same length and became more blunt and less tipped. Looking at the figures, this change in size and form is consistent between the two of them. And since HIYA Toys has used the same mold for 3 different movie variations, this comparison would be the exact same as if I were setting it next to the King of the Monsters Godzilla action figure. With that being said, HIYA Toys could be on a secret mission to recreate Godzilla's major changes between films. Now, I am aware that these figures operate on a non-scale basis, which means that there is no scale ratio between the figures and their on-screen counterparts. To that argument, I'd like to say, first of all, obviously there is no toy company that would make a figure within a certain scale of its 385-foot tall counterpart. Second of all, in-scale ratio and film recreation aren't always the same thing. You can recreate a character's change in size or shape between films without a scale ratio. As long as you have a baseline size for one of the figures, like the GVK Godzilla size, you can recreate the change in the character's film size by making them bigger or smaller in comparison to that specific figure. Meaning that HIYA Toys could be recreating the evolutionary changes this Godzilla went through between these movies with action figures that start at 6 inches in height. This theory would have been at least 98% true if it weren't for one small problem. The HIYA Toys GXK figures. While Kong's size doesn't actually change in between the films, Godzilla actually evolves and gets much bigger to face off against Shimo, who is also much bigger. Unfortunately, the Godzilla evolved figure is shorter than the GVK figure, and the Shimo figure is pretty much perfectly in scale with the Godzilla evolved figure. This unfortunately broke the size-changing immersion that HIYA Toys may or may not have been setting up for us. However, HIYA Toys has announced in their recent promotions that certain figures will be engineered to be larger. Specifically, the Atomic Breath Godzilla Evolved and the Ice Beam Shimo figure. The plot thickens. Until those figures get released, we won't really know for sure. But until then, if you have your own thoughts or theories, feel free to indulge in the comments below. And remember, that's just a theory. A toy theory! And thanks for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed that little show I put on at the end. I had a lot of fun with it, mostly because it was just me venting about my crazy and obsessive thoughts about the HIYA Toys Monsterverse lineup. I hope I got this video released relatively soon after my figure arrived. My goal for these toy reviews is to make videos and release them at least a week after the figure itself gets released to the public, because certain content creators that have early access to the figures will have early access to only certain kinds of figures, which means that the figures they received could be significantly different from the final product that is released to the general public. So my goal, being among the general public customers, I just want to make sure you know that the figures I'm getting will be the same figures you're getting. If you're interested, that is. So like I said, if you had to choose between one of the two HIYA Toys 2014 Godzilla figures, I recommend this one. And you can use my link in the description to pick yours up at the Kokis Toy Store. For some unknown reason, the Kokis Toy Store has exclusive access to the HIYA Toys brand of figures as soon as they're released. It could be regionally related. HIYA Toys is within the same region as Kokis Toy Store, but that's just a guess, so don't take my word for it. The Kokis Toy Store remains to be the quickest and most efficient option, since they inform you of every action after you purchase the figure. Whether it's HIYA Toys, Nanmu Studios, Joy Toy, or more, they tell you exactly when the purchase goes through, and they let you know when it ships, and they allow you to track it right after it ships. From the moment it leaves the warehouse, you'll know exactly where it is on the map, all the way up to the day that it's delivered to your front door. Use my link in the description, and you might be able to partake in a 4% discount option that is available for a limited time only, so be quick to click, my friends. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that my next toy review gets released relatively soon after it arrives. It kind of depends on what my situation is. Now that spring has begun, there is a big personal project that I will be working on for the first month or so. Follow my Instagram or Facebook page for updates as it happens. I'll announce it on my channel once it's complete. Check out my channel for more toy reviews, let's plays, movie edits, etc., etc. Subscribe and hit the bell to know when my next video is up, and I will see you all later!